Hi guys, and welcome to the course. There are many Linux systems, many Linux-based systems, and you might already be familiar with some. You might have heard of Linux Mint, Debian, Ubuntu, Gentoo, or Fedora, or any of the other millions of Linux systems. Now, it's very important that you trust whoever created your Linux system, so the organization behind your Linux system. If they do a bad job, you might have malware right in the installation phase. For example, in 2016, Linux Mint, one of the Linux variants, included malware in its official download file. So what happened was that Linux users, the Mint system, they could download Linux, and it had a backdoor included in the Linux system. So they would just go to the official Linux Mint site, install it, and then their computer would be hacked, it would be infected, would contain a backdoor. As you see here in the article, a backdoor was included to a location in Bulgaria. So that was using the official Linux Mint software. So you have to be very sure that you trust the people behind your Linux system, because all of your software comes from that organization. If they do a bad job, your system might be infected. It doesn't matter whether it's really a beginner distro or an advanced Linux system. For example, we have Arch Linux here, popular with advanced Linux distributions. And then in their App Store, the package repository, it contains malicious software, info stealer found in the Acroread software. And there are other examples of malicious software found in the Arch repositories in the past. So make sure that you choose a Linux system that you really trust. Sometimes the people in the organizations might make mistakes. It could be that they make such a big mistake that malware is included with the system you install. So you have to be really careful. I recommend just going with the official Linux systems that have big security teams behind them, instead of just all these random Linux systems. And that might download the Linux system, install it in your computer, and then it includes malware. So really bad idea. Stick with with Linux systems that actually have a security team, that have large organizations behind them. Otherwise, you might find malware in your computer that you do not want. So this is just a quick tip before we get started on Linux defense. Of course, defense first starts with software, which company you trust to software running on your computer. Hey there, and welcome back, Linux enthusiasts. Welcome back. This video is all about mastering user management on your Linux system. So Linux is a multi-user system. You can have multiple users. So it's all about creating new users, changing passwords, and deleting users. So stick around. It's gonna be a blast. If you're already familiar with Linux user management, you can skip this video. So let's start things off setting a password. So if we open a new terminal, either hold Ctrl Alt and press T, or go to your terminal, to your search bar, and type terminal. Terminal is where all the magic happens. So here we're gonna type some commands, and that's how we can add users, delete users, and also change password right from the command line. So you're probably logged in as some user already. Then you can change your password if you want to with the command sudo space passwd and then your username. If you don't know your username, you can type the command whoami. That's whoami altogether. And if you press enter, it will show you your username. Now if you want to change your password, you can type the command sudo passwd with your username. And then it will ask you a new password. If you pick a bad password, it will tell you. And you'll see the password is now updated. So it doesn't show the password you type. So if you do this, make sure to have at least 2 users. Why? Because it could be you changed your password and made a typo, and then when you try to log in again, you cannot log in. So it's a good idea to first add a new user before changing your password. So how do you add a new user? You can use the command sudo space add user and then the username. For example, Frank. You'll see it started to do new things. It's add a new user, Frank. It belongs to the group Frank. A directory for Frank files is created. and it asks for a password. So type some password. I'm just typing a dummy password here. Now, if you want to, you can specify some metadata like your full name, address, room, phone numbers, and stuff like that. But it's completely optional, so by pressing enter, you can skip that. And if it's correct, press the yes key, and the new user is then created. So now there are 2 users in the system, besides the administrator user called root. And you notice that we always type sudo in front, so that does commands as administrator. And administrator on Linux is always called root, so that's R-O-O-T. Okay, so now we have another user. We want to change the password of our newly created user. Then we type sudo passwd with that username. Now we can type our username again. Password. And you'll see the password has been updated. Now you can then log in as that user, so you can log out and then log in as the user you just added. Or you can delete a user, maybe it's a user you don't need at all. So to delete a user, you can type the command sudo del user and then the username, for example, Frank. And you see the user Frank has now been removed. So it can no longer be used to log in. So there you have it, Linux Maestros. We've showed you how you can create a user, change passwords, and also how you can delete a user on your Linux system. So user management made easy. If you found this helpful, keep watching. There will be a lot more cool stuff. That's all for this video. Hey there, Linux enthusiasts, and welcome back. In the last video, we took a look at basic user functions, so how you can add a user, how you can change a password and delete a user. But how do you know which users are inside a system? So to find out, there is several things you can do. For example, we can check the home directory. Home is where all the files are stored. So if I go to the home directory, you'll see by default it shows this. Now I'm gonna press Ctrl L. You'll see I'm in the directory home Ubuntu. If you go to the home directory, you might see other directories in there. So those directories belong to different users. But this doesn't necessarily mean they are user directories. So what you can do is to check that, to verify that in a file called etc password. So there's a file on Linux called /etc/password that contains a lot of user information. So you can find out real users of the computer, but also system users. So we're just gonna output that. This file can only be read by the administrator. So I'm gonna type sudo in front. So this command will show you information from that file. So basically the file contents of etc password, and that information in that file is really about users on the system. So you'll see I pressed enter and it looks a bit cryptic, but you'll see, for example, on top there is the user root, which exists on every Linux system. And you'll see the home directory of that user. So in this case, root, and if they can log in. So if a user can log into the system, you'll see something like bin bash. If they can't log in, you'll see user has been no login. So you'll see a user daemon and they cannot log in. It says no login. But for user root, they can log in. There is bin bash. Now, new users are added to the bottom of the file. So if we scroll to the bottom, you'll see we have some users here. We have Ubuntu, which has /home/Ubuntu, and they can log in. You'll see bin bash. I think, why do we start here and not the line above? Well, there's GDM here, which is not a user. You'll see that they cannot log in on the last line. /bin bash is false, so that's not login. You can only log in if there's bin bash or bin z shell here. If there's bin/bin/false or /user has been no login, then it's just a system user or a user that cannot log in. You'll see these users can all log in. They have bin bash at the end. You'll also see the user directory. So indeed, those are user directories: home Ubuntu, home Frank, and home Tux. So there is 3 users on this system. So this is one way you can see users. Now it might be a bit overwhelming because it also shows you system users that cannot log in at all. So what you can do is pipe it. You say type this pipeline and then type grep bin bash, and then it only shows the users on the system given that they use bash. It's possible to use other terminal interfaces. Most people will use bash. This command you can see which users exist on a Linux system given that they use bash, which most Linux users do. And so now we just have a list of 4 instead of a huge list with system users in there. You can quickly see users on a system this command. Now another way to check is by the ID. So if you output the file, the users start with number 999 and higher. So you can also just check by the number. All the numbers lower are system users, except for the root user. So you see root here is obviously not a system user, but everything in between, yes. So you can also search just by line number, so any line starting with 999 or higher. But the most easy is just to check if they can log in with bin bash. So using this command will tell you which Linux users exist on your system. So that of course should only be the Linux users you created. If there is some other user there that you don't know about, it might be that there's something funky is going on. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next ones. Hello tech enthusiasts, welcome back. In this video we're diving into the world of firewalls. So ever wondered how to fortify your Linux system against potential threats? Stick around as we explore what firewalls are and then take a deep dive into the powerful and user-friendly, uncomplicated firewall. So get ready to bolster your system defenses. Let's start with the basic. What exactly is a firewall and why do you need it? In simple terms, a firewall acts as a security guard for your computer, controlling incoming and outgoing network traffic based on certain rules. So it's like a security guard for your computer. So it's your first line of defense against malicious actors and unwanted access. So let's talk about the uncomplicated firewall. So first we'll meet the uncomplicated firewall. First thing we'll need to do is to install it. If you're on Ubuntu, you can do this command, sudo apt-get install ufw. This will install the uncomplicated firewall onto your computer if you use Ubuntu Linux. If you use any other Linux system, you need to use the installation command for that Linux system. Firewall will be called the same, so ufw. You'll see Ubuntu, it's already installed in this computer. So now let's get our hands dirty. First, we'll enable the firewall. So to do that, we type sudo. So we need to run this as root, as administrator. ufw enable. So sudo ufw enable, that will enable your firewall. You see, just took a moment. Now the firewall is active and enabled and startup. So we're done, right? Not exactly. The firewall, the security guard, does things based on rules. So we need to add some rules, and we might also want to check if the firewall is actually running. So we can do that using the command sudo ufw status. Will tell you it's running. If there are any rules, they will be listed with this command. So if you type sudo ufw and there are firewall rules, they will be shown right there. So let's add some rule. For instance, allow incoming traffic on port 80. Port 80 is the web port HTTP. So to do that, you type sudo ufw allow 80, and then a rule has been added, an allow rule. Any incoming traffic on port 80, so any network traffic goes over ports, like a unique number. So you might have web traffic going by port 80, you might have file transfers going by port 21, and different apps on your computer will use different ports to communicate with the internet. So it's just a way to simply separate types of network traffic. So 80 is for web traffic as well as 443. In this case, we'll just use 80 for simplicity. Now, if we check the status command again, you'll see the status command shows you your rules. So it shows active, and then it shows you rules. So anything incoming on port 80, action is allow, and from anywhere. Right? So that is a very basic command that we just added. Now you can also deny things. For example, we can deny traffic instead of allow. And now let's take a look what happens. And you'll see now the port 80 traffic is blocked. You'll see if we open the web browser. It'll take a moment. So you'll see we can still open web pages. That's because UFW in this case is blocking incoming traffic. So network traffic or internet traffic coming into our computer and not going out of our computer. That's why we can still visit web pages. But incoming traffic on port 80 is blocked. So anyone connecting to this computer on port 80, that is blocked. A good technique is to block anything of just one port and only allow really need. For example, if you need another computer to connect to your computer for file sharing, you might want to block everything on the network except that. Now, if you don't want anybody connecting to your computer at all, you might want to just disable any network traffic coming into your computer. But it really depends on what you do with your computer as well. Maybe if you do a lot of video calls, you might need it. It depends on how you use your computer. But the firewall, UFW, is your security guard that tells you what traffic can come in your computer and what can go out of your computer. So there you have it, Linux enthusiasts. We've covered a very basic introduction of firewalls very quickly. So it's your security guard for your Linux system, and you can use it to keep cyber threats at bay. So until next time, stay secure and keep exploring. Hi guys, and welcome back. It's a good idea to keep your system up to date. Software often has many bugs, called vulnerabilities, that hackers can use to get into your system. So it's a good idea to keep your system updated. And it doesn't matter which system you use, whether you use Ubuntu Linux, whether you use Fedora, or any other Linux system, even Windows, Mac, or whatever. It's very important to keep your system up to date so that those vulnerabilities cannot be used to take over your system. So how do you update a system in Ubuntu Linux? Well, first we need to open a terminal. Either press Ctrl-Alt-T or open one yourself by clicking on the left corner and then selecting Terminal. Then you can update the package list. So Ubuntu comes with a packaging system where there's a package list and you can install packages or software from that list. To update that package list, you type the command sudo apt update. That command will update the package list. You see, if I press enter, it's updating the list that it gets from the web. Now, every Linux system has a similar system called a package manager, where you can update your system and can install packages. So this is the system for Ubuntu. They have the apt system. If you use other Linux systems, they have other mechanisms to update your system. Now the system is not updated, but just the packages. Sudo apt update updates your package list, which it gets from this website. You'll see it also checks the CD-ROM. Many computers these days don't have that. To do an upgrade, you can type the command sudo apt upgrade. So apt is the package manager system. And you'll see it asks you if you want to update. If you do yes, it will download 700 megabytes or more, depending on how much there is to update. That will update a lot of software on your computer system, so that's sudo apt upgrade. So that will actually change software on your computer. The command before, the apt update, just updates the package list. It doesn't actually do anything software beyond that. So the other command really upgrades your system. If you don't use Ubuntu, if you use Fedora, then you can use the command dnf. So if you use Fedora, you type the command sudo dnf update to update your package list, and to upgrade you would type sudo dnf upgrade. But that's only if you use Fedora Linux instead of Ubuntu. It depends on your package manager. Every Linux system has their own package manager that is basically like a kind of app store where you can install and update your system. Hope you had a good time so far. When installing software, you want to stick to official repositories, official sources whenever possible. Why? Because there's a lot of malware out there, malicious software. When you install random things from the internet, there's a big chance that one of them can be malware. So every Linux system has their own organization behind them, and I recommend just installing from that to prevent getting malware, because the less software you install, the less likely that you have malware on your computer. Now, you can install software with your package manager on Linux, and I recommend just doing that and not going outside of the package manager system. To install something, you can type sudo apt something to install. So whatever your software is called. For Ubuntu and Debian based systems, sometimes it's called apt-get or apt. If you use Fedora, you use DNF instead. If you use another Linux system, you have the package manager for that system. Any manager have a search option. For example, you might type search for some kind of package. You're interested in text, so you would type text editor programs, and it would then output that information. Now, where does it install from, right? So it installs from the sources that you allow. Now, if you do random sources, other sources from the internet, it might be that you install malware by accident. So you can see these sources in the file etc apt sources.list for Ubuntu systems. So in this file, you'll see in this file, it shows you what sources are allowed. etc apt sources.list. You'll see it's allowed a CD-ROM file, but also the internet. And so trusting the internet is of course a big ability, but also a big risk. Because what if one of these websites get hacked? Then they could put malware on your computer. Sometimes CD-ROM might be a better approach, but it really depends on your setup. The downside of CD-ROM approach is, of course, you will have to maintain updated CDs for your updates. So just one possibility. But it might be if you have strange links in there, that might not be the best idea. Installing software from random websites might get you malware on your Linux computer. So anyway, you can check with etc apt sources.list. That file contains your list of sources for Ubuntu and Debian based systems. For other Linux systems, there's another sources file, but it's down to the same principle, where there's a list of websites that are allowed to install software on your computer, and you want to make sure that you really trust those websites instead of having random websites in there. Welcome back, Linux users. So in your Linux system, you might be using it for a while and installing things and doing things with your Linux system. Malware can sneak in using all kinds of tricks. So it's a good idea to scan your system for malware. On Linux systems, you can install antivirus or anti-malware software called ClamAV. You can install it with your package manager. So ClamAV is the program. If you install it, you might wonder how to run it, because if you type ClamAV, it doesn't run. If you type ClamAV, actually nothing happens. I'll show you ClamAV not found. So what is that about, right? You install it, ClamAV, sudo apt install ClamAV, you run it. Nope. It's because the program to scan is called ClamScan. So if you type ClamScan, with ClamScan, you can scan a directory for malicious software. So by default, if we type ClamScan, you'll see it just scans the current directory, and it tells scans all the files in the current directory. So you'll see this is the same directory it scans. There were some hidden files in there which start with a dot, and they're all okay. So it didn't find any infected files. You'll see that by default it scans just the directory that we're in. So in this case /home/Ubuntu, and it didn't scan any of these directories, which is kind of silly, because perhaps malware is hiding in the downloads directory or any of the other subdirectories, which are then not scanned because it only scans the directory that you specify. So let's say I want to scan everything, so all the directories. I would type ClamScan -r for recursive, or meaning scan all the subdirectories, and then the directory you want to scan, for example home Ubuntu or whatever directory you specify. And you'll see it then starts scanning not just home Ubuntu, but all the subdirectories as well. So it does important to add the -r flag to, or the -r parameter, to scan all the subdirectories beyond just the main directory that you specify. And you'll see now it scanned a lot more directories, 181. So there's a lot of hidden directories here, and scanned 157 files, and nothing was infected. System. So with ClamScan, you can scan your Linux system for viruses, malicious software, and to do that, it uses a virus database behind the scenes. So you'll see it says it uses a virus database which has like 8 million known viruses for Linux and other systems. Scans your whole directory, and if there's a match, it will tell you that there's a malicious software on your system, and you can then remove it. Of course, the idea is that you don't get infected in the first place, which is why the good practices is only install software from official sources from the Linux system that you trust. Hello and welcome back. Now, passwords, you know that is very important in security, but they also can be really annoying when they come with all these rules, like you have to add uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and so on. So why is that in the first place? Well, let's say we allow remote access into this Linux computer. We can do so using SSH server. And that is often used for system administration, so not for hackers to get into your system, but just so that you as a Linux user can log into your computer, maybe from home, log into work, without physically to work. So really for like a remote desktop, but instead remote terminal. So you might enable that, and then we install this on SSH server. So that takes a moment to install. Then let's say we enable it. Now it might be that the firewall is blocking, so let's check the status. Okay, it's inactive in this case, so the firewall is running. Now to connect to this computer from remotely, we need to know its network address. Can get it with IPAS, and you see this is the internet address. It's an address with 4 dots, so your computer network address. So that can be used to connect to this computer. So here we have 2 Ubuntu computers, a Ubuntu computer on the left here and a Ubuntu computer on the right. Now we can remotely connect to it using the network address and using just a password, the password of that account. So if you know the passwords, then you can log in. So let's say we log in. We can then remotely control this computer on the left. So legitimate purpose, like a remote desktop, you can do remote terminal. The only thing we needed to log in was the password. And what happens if you don't pick a good password? So this time on the right, we have a computer system called Kali Linux, a system often used for hacking. So it might be that a hacker tries to get into your system. Check who's on the network. So they might do a scan. Using, for example, this command, we can find out who's on the computer network. Sorry, in this command, they might find who is on the computer network. They start scanning. Then they find your computer on the network. You'll see here this matches the address that we have here. They might check, okay, what applications is running on your Linux system, that network applications. They can do a scan. They might find, hey, SSH is running, so they did a scan using a program called nmap. Could try to get into your computer, or in this case, into your app, the SSH app, or whichever other network app you're running, by trying different passwords one by one. Now, instead of doing that manually, instead of typing the passwords themselves, they just use a password list and make a computer program type all those passwords. So, for example, there's a list included in Kali. Users share word lists called rockutxt. So I'm going to copy that to the main directory. And you'll see that takes a second to extract. It's a list of millions of passwords, or 1.4 million passwords, I think. If I output it, and you'll see commonly used passwords. many different passwords in that file. They might try to simply log into your computer using a tool called Hydra. Hydra tool can be used to try passwords one by one. So you'll see this is an example Hydra command. So they might type Hydra -L with the user, then with the password list, and then target the application. SSH was open with the IP address they found of the computer. And then what the program does is try every password in that password list for the user Ubuntu to log into the computer. So you'll see if I press enter, it starts trying different passwords one by one. And if it finds the passwords, the attacker can then log in to the computer, whether it's SSH, remote desktop, maybe sharing, server, or whatever you have running on your Linux computer. If you pick a bad password, they might use an automated brute force method to try to break into your system. And if you're interested in hacking using brute force, I have some courses on that, so you might be interested to check that out. But the main key point or the main takeaway here is to pick a really good password that is not a commonly used password. Otherwise, it will be really easy to get into your computer and that you're on the same computer network.